To my right is the slope that takes you over the very busy A494 road. When the railway existed, the road was known as the A550, and in those days the road crossed over the railway. Today, obviously the railway is no more, however the route is the Connah's Quay to Mickle Trafford cycle path, hence why this fine bridge is here today. Built in 2004 to join the two ends of the cycle path, it's officially called the Millennium Greenway Bridge. It's also sometimes referred to as the Dragon Bridge, probably because of this Welsh dragon. Back in the peace and quiet again, and leaving the A494 and Sealand station behind, I'm still within the realms of the former airbase. On my left would have been sidings. Unfortunately, there's nothing to see these days, although a number of the old airbase buildings do still remain, hidden behind these trees. Ahead, we come to the line's first overbridge since departing the triangle at Demarsh Junction. This one appears to be a disused occupation bridge. If we have a quick look at the map from the National Library of Scotland site dated 1950s, you can see those aforementioned sidings and also the subsequent bridge. The next structure, just a short distance along the route, is another bridge at Green Lane, essentially a farmer's crossing, but I thought we'd stop for a moment just to look at the intriguing construction. Now, to all intents and purposes, it's a very ordinary bridge, but I've always been fascinated by the sort of vaulted brickwork on the underside. Obviously built for strength, but I can't help thinking that it's maybe possibly over-engineered. This style seems to be evident of a number of bridges on this line, and I wonder where else you'd find this kind of construction. Here I'm standing on top of the same bridge, showing the view west towards Sealand, and then east past the fly dumped rubbish towards Chester. Walking this old route, as with others which have been needlessly closed over the last 70 years or so, it makes you wonder how successful it would have been had it been allowed to stay open. Maybe with just a little positivity, thought, promotion and forward thinking, it would have been financially viable. Besides, you never hear of a road being closed because it isn't cost effective. Continuing east along the former track bed, it's clear that the line went through some lovely countryside. Here, on a slight embankment, ballast is still visible among the grass and greenery, and it's not too difficult to envisage that this was once a double track railway. This photo, taken in May 1992, shows a locomotive just west of Saughall, on the exact spot I am now walking upon. Despite it showing two lines, at this time only one was in use, which itself was in a very poor state. But it's a good illustration to remind just how recently the railway was here. Ahead of me, on the opposite side of this overbridge, we come to the line's next station, Saughall. Now the most obvious feature that's still clearly visible at Saughall, or not covered in undergrowth, is the bridge. Now, at one point, obviously we're looking at the Chester bound platform, or where it used to be. It's still there, but the slope where it's been cleared there, I think it had steps coming down from Seahill Road, or Station Road as it was back in the day. There doesn't appear to be any evidence of those steps, and the main station entrance, the road into it, was pretty much directly through those bushes over there. But other than the bridge, there's very little to be seen today, unless you've got a very good vegetation clearer. Opened in 1890 by the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway, later renamed the Great Central, Saughall Station suffered from the outset in being too distant from the village it represented. In fact, it was actually closer to Sealand, and while the village of Saughall could be found in England, the station resided across the border in Wales. Consequently, passenger numbers were sparse throughout its existence. Finally, in February 1954, despite the line continuing to serve passengers until 1968, Saughall Station closed. Now I'm continuing eastwards between the two platforms. Not that it's particularly obvious, thanks to them being so overgrown. But occasionally, as you saw just a moment ago, the edging stones of the platform do become visible. As I said, there's not a great deal to see, although a couple of weeks ago I did climb up onto the westbound platform and have a bit of a mooch about. Now, I did actually find the fence posts and part of the fence, part of the perimeter fence at the back of the platform. They were still extant, and partly buried at the base of a tree trunk on top of the platform, I uncovered 4 discarded fish plates, which are, I mean, they were very rusty, as you can see by the picture. They've been there a long time. Now, these houses that you can see on the left are, oh look, you can see there's a piece of the platform stone there on the eastbound platform. As I said, it does occasionally appear through the greenery. So yeah, these houses, they were built, I'd say about 15 years ago. They're built directly on the old goods yard, which sits on the north side of the station. Now, I think we're coming to the end of the platforms, or we've already come to the end of the platforms, and there on the left you can see the roofs of those houses. Now, they are original railway cottages. They were built, I believe, when the station was built, obviously for the staff, around 1890, so definitely the end of the 19th century. Now, that area to my right, which looks like masses of brambles and weeds, is exactly that, but it is also the site of Saughall signal box. I had a bit of a poke around and I found brickwork and a base, and I believe that's the remains of it. I'll turn to the National Library of Scotland map of the 1950s, which shows Saughall station more or less isolated. To the north is the small goods yard containing a goods shed and a loading crane. A little to the east can be seen the railway cottage as I mentioned earlier. Today's view shows the typical inclusion of houses obliterating any previous history, but at least any expansion is kept in check by the railway's original perimeter. You can see Saughall station in the distance, rooftops of the houses, a bit of smoke coming from the chimney. That's actually beyond. You can see the line of the embankment in front of us, depicted by the tree line, and we're now moving towards Blacon. I'm crossing the border now into England. Ahead is the cliff edge denoting the original course of the River Dee prior to its route being altered in the 1730s. Obviously, a cutting was engineered through the higher ground to allow the railway to progress, but a much more recent addition to the landscape is this raised pipeline before us. I've spent a lot of time trying to research this pipe. Alas, there is nothing definitive to prove its purpose. The best and closest information I can find is that it is part of the wartime Pluto pipeline, whereby a network of oil pipes were laid the length of the country to pump oil to the southern ports and across the Channel to France to help fuel ships and vehicles taking part in the invasion of France in 1944. Pluto, by the way, is an acronym of Pipeline Under the Ocean. This theory seems to make sense geographically, as not far north of here an identical pipe emerges from the ground for a few yards in Blacon, at the back of the police station and to the west of the Shropshire Union Canal. It heads north to Stanlow, a large oil terminal which was known to be vital during the inland Pluto operation. This of course is my interpretation, and I would love it to be true. Of course, if anyone knows otherwise, please let me know in the comments. Now we're arriving at our next station, which is Blacon. So we're moving east. Now the station would have been directly, in fact probably under this bridge. If you look here, this is where the westbound platform would have been, going towards Saughall. And until quite recently, probably only about 5 to 10 years, there was a small remnant of platform that was visible. Unfortunately, it's now been completely covered in tarmac. But if you look, a bit of effort has been made here, despite the fact that the fantastic mock Tudor building which stood right here and both platforms have been completely demolished. You'll see that, I presume it's the council has made an effort to recreate, but this was once a railway station and indeed a railway run through here. And even the fact that there is nothing here, there's no platforms, no building, just a couple of signs and the mock level crossing gates up ahead and behind, do very well in indicating that this was indeed railway. So we're leaving Blacon behind now, but before we go, in these trees here, and where those houses are, you can see them just behind the trees, there was a small goods yard with a small goods shed. Now there's a bit of a dip, a bit of a recess in the ground. I don't know whether that's where the sidings used to be or whether that's because the area here has been raised up. It could be one of either, to be honest with you. But if we move along, going east a little bit, now in the trees here is a little brick recess. It's a little bit difficult to see because of the summer growth. I'll put a picture up that shows it better that I took in the winter. And I was deliberating and wondering what this was for quite some time, and when I had a good look at the map, I finally worked out that this is the brick recess where Blacon signal box was. I'm about 99.9% sure. So I'm pretty certain that that little recess, brick lined, although hard to see, is where Blacon signal box used to be. Looking at the map of 1898 shows that back then Blacon was still very rural. Having only been opened 8 years previously, Blacon fared much better than Saughall. Built in the same mock Tudor style, it continued to be well used right up to its closure in 1968. Compare that map of 1898 to today's overview, and Blacon Station is at the heart of a huge housing estate. Imagine how convenient and useful the railway would be had it survived.